Hi, and welcome back to Chapter 2, Part 2. Last time we looked at the internal analysis, the strengths and weaknesses internally of um, an organization. And now we're going to look at an external analysis of their externalities, so the opportunities that there may be from that and the threats that they may be for that. So this is the second half of a SWOT analysis. So we're going to look at external, and first we're going to look at demographics. And we're going to look at the demographics of the target market that the company may be pursuing. So what do the customers look like? And there are two kinds of demographics we're going to look at. We're going to look at consumer demographics. So these would be ultimate consumers like you and me for the most part. And then business demographics. And they're two different um, slices because businesses and consumers look at purchases slightly differently, but it's the same idea. We want to know what our customer, potential customer, the customer within our target looks like. And once we know what they look like, then we can do other things with that information. So um, big numbers, we want to know whether the population in our target market is growing or shrinking. So if we're selling, I don't know, baby carriages, are there more babies being born or fewer babies being born in the particular geographic market that we're looking at? So population growth is an important thing to know, and then we want to know the composition of our population, our target market population. How old are they? Men or women? Ethnicity, are they uh, Irish Americans like me, or are they Mexican Americans, or are they German Americans? Uh, Whatever, if we're talking about the American market, so we want to know what ethnic background they have, because that may have something to do with how we're going to appeal to them or how we're going to make something that they value. Religious makeup, important to know. Are they religious people? And if they're religious, what kind of religion? Has a lot to do with how we may approach our target market. How educated are they? Are they high school educated? Are they college educated? Do they have graduate or advanced degrees? Um, that's an important piece to know, what places they work, kinds of jobs they do, how big a household they come from. Do they come from a household of one, so single people, or couples, so that'd be two people, or couples with children, so that's a larger sized um, household, so household size, and then income. So I think in the first chapter we talked a little bit about Mercedes-Benz and their positioning. What pieces would Mercedes-Benz be interested in their target market compensation? Well, they might well be looking at people with high income. They may well be looking at people with relatively high education, maybe small to medium-sized household size, um, people with professional occupations. I'm not sure whether Mercedes targets men or women. I'm not familiar with that. And I'm guessing that Mercedes probably targets older people. So they're probably not targeting teenagers. I expect they're targeting a more mature target market. So that's the kind of thing we need to know. We need to know what's going on out there. On the business side, we need to know different kinds of things. We need to know how many companies are in the industry I'm targeting. How many locations or branches do they have? How many employees do they have? How big are they? What are their sales? Are there new businesses forming in the target that we're looking at, or are there business, is it shrinking? Is there consolidation going on? So that kind of stuff is important because it's going to inform how both we design our product, but also how we price our product and where we're going to place our product. All of those four P's have a lot to do with who it is we're targeting and what they look like. You also need to know some sort of big macro type trends. What's the what's happening to the economy? Is our national economy growing or shrinking? Is the global economy growing or shrinking? regional and local economy, growing or shrinking. Obviously, if economies are growing, there's usually more money to spend, and therefore the buying power is going up. Incomes may be going up. Do our target market customers have lots of debt, be they corporate or individual? Do they use a lot of credit or not? If we're looking internationally, we might look at the trade values of a country we're looking at entering, or we may look at currency values as well. So all of those are things that we look at in the external analysis. And I'm going through this relatively quickly. We're going to go into depth as we go through the course in each one of these areas. So this is kind of chapters 1, 2, and I think 3 also are kind of overviews, and then we're going to get into some more detail as we go on, and we're also going to be doing case studies, which should inform you about how we apply, how we use all this information that's being force-fed to you at the moment. So also need to know about some ecological trends, and we tend to think of ecology as tree hugging or taking care of the environment, but when we talk about it in marketing, we're talking about the outside ecology or world that an organization is living in. So if I'm a manufacturer, I may want to know, and I'm looking to build something, I may want to know about the availability of raw materials. Electronics use lots of something called rare earth minerals. Rare earth minerals are very, as the word says, rare. They don't, in the manufacturing process for electronics, they're used, not very much of them, but they're used and they're essential. And almost all of the rare earth minerals in the world are mined in China. So China has a kind of a stranglehold on that market. And a couple of years ago, they were upset with the Japanese, and they cut off exports of rare earth minerals to Japan for a short period of time. And Japan is, of course, a high-tech manufacturing economy that builds lots of things that use rare earth minerals. So this was a significant thing, that availability of these materials. At that time, because of that, various countries around the world started looking to exploit rare earth minerals that were in their control, including the US, which reopened a mine in California, that had mined these sorts of minerals before and had stopped, and they reopened the mine because prices went up because the supply was short. Need to know about government regulations. Is it going to affect what I do? If I'm in the auto industry, there's a zillion government regulations on safety and emissions and so forth. So I have to know what those are, and are they going to affect my product offerings? Government sometimes has mandates about things, and sometimes there are just social attitudes. I think most of us are familiar with the change in the social attitude towards tobacco. So when I was a young man, everybody smoked. I happened to be one of the few that didn't, and I was kind of the person on the out in social situations because I was the only one that wasn't smoking. Or often, maybe not the only one, but one of a few who didn't smoke at all. Nowadays, it's the roles are reversed. People who smoke are kind of ostracized. There aren't very many of them, and they have to go outside to smoke, and outside the building, or in Maine Maritime's case, off campus. So that kind of social attitude, sometimes reinforced with laws and regulations, has changed dramatically. And if I'm marketing something like cigarettes, I should probably know about those social attitudes that are affecting my product. Another good example from some of you may remember, General Motors made Humvees for a while, which were derived from the military version that GM was making for the government of sort of off-road vehicles. And Humvees got a reputation as a bad thing ecologically or environmentally, and if you drove one, you were considered to be a bad person. So the product failed in the US because of social attitudes. They were expensive vehicles. They were pretty good vehicles as far as I know. Never been in one, never drove one. But if you owned one, people looked at you like you had two heads, that you were not a good person. So who wants to be in that situation? Who wants to be sort of excluded or labeled just because they happen to drive a certain kind of vehicle? So that's kind of a social attitude. You got to be careful of that in marketing, because social attitudes can have a big effect on your marketing. Another area that has huge effects, and maybe these are accelerating effects for those of us living presently, is the technological trends. I mean, in the last 10 to 15 years, the world has changed so significantly in terms of communication that it's just hard to keep up. Smartphones didn't exist 10 years ago. The iPad or other tablets didn't exist 10 years ago. Digital media was in its infancy 10 years ago. Social networking was in its infancy, and now it's the mode of communication. People didn't telecommute until maybe 15 to 20 years ago. And telecommuting changes all sorts of things in terms of marketing and where your customers are. As somebody who ran retail stores in the center of the financial district and other places in Boston, telecommunicating became a huge deal when they were building what they called the Big Dig, when they put the raised highways in Boston underground. It made traffic absolutely impossible. And most of my customer base started telecommuting because it was more efficient. So they were only coming to work once or twice a week, as opposed to coming to Boston every day. And that meant that my customer base went away. My customer base was people who worked in the city, because I had a store located in the financial district. If there's only half as many people coming to work every day, that's going to affect my business pretty dramatically. And in addition, when they do come to work, they generally don't take time off to go to lunch, because they're doing all the things in 2 days that they would normally do in 5 in terms of connecting with fellow employees. So really changed my business pretty dramatically because of the telecommuting option. And I had to be familiar with that and understand that and react to that. And maybe at some point we'll talk about some of those things that you can do to overcome changes in those technological trends. Big data is currently a big part of technological changes companies are using, and the availability of big data is allowing people really to do what we're talking about, allow you to target customers better, to understand what they do better, and therefore it's changing how we approach marketing. And then network security, recording this on the day that there was a huge breakdown in networks, mostly in hospitals, but all over the world. So network security is a technological trend that has to be addressed and considered in any marketing plan. So lots of changes, and next year there'll be 6 more things on here that the change is happening rapidly. Political and legal trends. You need to be familiar with those things. These are external factors. These may be threats or opportunities for an organization, depending on what business you're in. So laws relative to competitive behavior, pricing, taxation, how you can write ads, what's legal and what's not legal, labor laws, product liability laws, labeling laws, a zillion things that you have to look at in terms of externalities for any particular product. And you have to be familiar with them. And obviously, in the US, you've got federal, state, and local laws. But then worldwide, you have laws in various countries. So lots of potential things to look at there for externalities. Political trends. If you're selling internationally, you have to look at government instability and political violence, nationalism, regulation, and taxation. Recently, over the last 2 years, most multinational companies have left Venezuela because of government instability and political violence, and also because of macroeconomic trends. So you've seen major companies pulling out, including the airlines, American Airlines and United Airlines and British Airways have all pulled out of Venezuela. They're not flying there anymore because they find it to be incredibly unprofitable to do so. And oil companies have pulled out and so forth. So there's a government instability, there's political violence, and then there's really bad macroeconomic trends. So you got to be careful when you decide where to go internationally. And then locally, you need to look at taxation, national, so U.S. and local government taxation and regulations are politically very important. Social cultural trends. Popular culture. Pop culture changes a lot and it affects lots of things. These changes often are fads. They don't last very long, but they are definitely real and they definitely have an effect on your company, your product, your market. So when things are hot, then you're doing well, but realize that these things are fads and they don't last forever. I have a good example from of that. I'm not sure how many of you, when you were kids, used yo-yos. It's usually approximately a 7-year trend. So depending on how old you are, some of you may have been in the fad when yo-yos were popular, and some may not. The largest maker of yo-yos in the US is located in Rhode Island. And I happen to know somebody there at one point in time. And they knew about these fads, but they also knew that fads moved across the country. So they would focus their promotional efforts as the fad moved across. So if the yo-yo fad starts in California and it's popular there for a year or maybe two, and then it moves to the mountain states where it's popular for a year or two, and then it moves to the Midwest for a year or two, and then it moves to the East for a year or two, and then it becomes popular back again in California. So apparently young kids want to do something that their older brothers and sisters didn't do, so that 7-year strike cycle seems to be very real. And this company basically lived with the cycle, and their business was quite stable because they were able to follow the fad across the country and then reinstitute, get back to the West Coast and do it again. So kind of an interesting process where this thing keeps coming back. Core beliefs and values change much more slowly than fads. So make sure you need to know what core beliefs are depending on what you're selling and how you're doing it, but they are much slower changing. So probably the first thing you think about externally, and not the first thing I talked about, the first thing you think about is, what are my competitors doing? Who are they? And who might enter the market over time? So it's not just who's there now, but who might come into that market that I'm looking at in the future. And figure out what each competitor is good at. In marketing, we call that competitive advantage or core competency. And understand what your competitors' core competencies are. And then back at when we looked at internal strengths and weaknesses, understand your own core competencies. They're probably not going to be the same as your competitors, and that's an area that you can exploit. If I'm strong here, I want to emphasize my strength in whatever it is I'm selling or making or offering, and I want to exploit my competitors' weaknesses. So in order to do that, before you can even think about doing that, you have to know what those core competencies are for each of your competitors. Also important to know how big your customers are. Are they, what's their share of the particular market you're looking at? Are they do they have a big share or a small share? So, so when you're creating a marketing plan, there are really 3 fundamental strategies that can be looked at. So you can look at almost every marketing strategy and break it into one of these three groups. Now, there are lots of nuances within each strategy, so they're not exactly the same, but most strategies fit into these categories. So cost price leadership strategy, being a low cost producer and being a price leader. Think of companies that use that as a strategy. Walmart is one, Amazon is another, Southwest Airlines is one. These are all companies that have focused on keeping their costs lower than their competitors and using a price leadership strategy. So they're all about selling price. So I think Walmart's tagline is low cost always, or low price always, something like that. So that's a cost leadership strategy. We're focused on price. We're going to deliver goods at the very best price possible. And in order to do that, we have to be the lowest cost producer. Because if we're not, other people will undersell us and we'll not meet our strategy. So that's one strategy, cost price. Second strategy is a differentiation strategy. So I'm going to make my product different. Think about Nike. Are they the low cost price leadership company? No, they're an innovation company. They differentiate their product. They're selling fashion, they're selling performance, they're not selling price. Hey, Air Jordans are, God knows how much they cost. They certainly are not the low price leader. But in any of their products, they're not trying to be the low price leader. They're trying to provide value, but they're providing it by differentiating their product from everyone else's, not just being the cheapest. So that's a differentiation strategy, and they're still covering the broad parts of the market. And then the third strategy is a niche strategy or a focus strategy, where you take a small core piece of the market and you niche yourself. You set yourself up so you're the dominant player in a small place. You're not trying to be everything to everybody. And within that niche strategy, you may choose to be a price leader, or you may choose to be a differentiation leader, but you're targeting a narrow marketplace. That is certainly Mercedes is doing a niche strategy. They're not trying to be the car company that sells cars to everybody. They're trying to be the car company that sells cars effectively to a very small niche within the market. So that's a focus strategy. And you can find people with focus strategies that are not necessarily at the high end like Mercedes, but might be at an economy end as well, or price end. So those three strategies pretty much fit almost every marketing plan can be fit into one of those three strategies, though there are lots of differences within each marketing plan. We've talked about SWOT analysis. So we've just gone through all of the pieces of a SWOT analysis, and you've got to do some of these on your own as well. This is another process, Porter's 5 Forces, that helps you identify certain things about markets. And this was developed by Michael Porter, who's a professor at the Harvard Business School. He's quite a famous guy, and he came up with this a long time ago in the 1980s, and it is proved to the test of time. It works quite well. And what it really is trying to do is trying to say, if I look at this industry, whatever this industry might be, is it a place where I can make above commodity level profits? Or is this a market that is so competitive that I may be profitable, but I'm not going to be very profitable because it's such a competitive market? So we can look at any market and say these 5 things determine whether this market will be an attractive market to enter. So if we start here with the bargaining power of consumers, if the customers have a lot of power, a lot of bargaining power, they can bargain with members of the people providing stuff in that industry and get a better price, then that makes it a less attractive market. If the bargaining power of customers is low, then it makes it a more attractive market. Threat of new entrants. Is this an easy market to enter, or is it a hard market to enter? If there's a high threat of new entrants, if it's easy to enter the market, then it's a less attractive market. If it's hard to enter the market, then it's a more attractive market. So markets that require either a lot of regulatory approval or a lot of money, a lot of capital, tend to be harder to enter than markets that don't. Anybody can form a landscaping firm or a lawn mowing firm, pretty much. Don't need a lot of education, don't need a lot of capital. If I want to start a landscaping or a lawn mowing company, it's pretty easy. So it's easy for new entrants to enter that market if it looks attractive. Not everybody can drill for oil. It's harder to enter that market. You have to have a lot more expertise and probably a lot more capital. Threat of substitutes. Are there lots of other products like this market's products that people may move to? So threat of substitutes. Well, I can go to the movies for entertainment, or I can go to a live theater for entertainment, or I can stay home and watch television for entertainment. Those are substitute products. They're not direct competitors, but they're all providing entertainment. So if there's lots of substitutes for my product, it's less attractive than if I have a unique niche or a unique product, or the industry is unique. Bargaining power of suppliers, same thing. If my suppliers have a lot of bargaining power and they can force me to pay more for my inputs, then that becomes a less attractive market. If the suppliers are fragmented, don't have much bargaining power, then it's more attractive. And then finally, the thing in the middle there, how competitive is the current industry? Is it there are lots of active and aggressive competitors, or is it kind of sleepy and there's not so many people in that industry? So if the competitors are active and aggressive, it's less attractive, and if there aren't as many competitors, it's more attractive. So we'll get into Porter's a little later when you start doing some case analysis, but it's a good thing to know about. And we've covered SWOT: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Strengths and weaknesses are internal, and opportunities and threats are external. So that's it for chapter 2, and that will wrap up week 2. It's important that you do your bios and get them submitted this week, and also comment on your classmates' bios, at least 3 of them, and I may jump in as well and make a few comments. And thank you very much. Bye.